Today we're going to learn how to do isometric letters, and then we're going to use that to create like a nameplate for our door or bedroom or whatever you want to do with it. Welcome to the art project. Hello, I got this set of sheets on isometric alphabet from John's Resources in 2019 off of Teacher Pay Teachers, and it has been fantastic. I love it. These letters are beautiful. When I printed it out, they came with several things. I just have the capital letters here, but it had lowercase and numbers as well, and he's got some other things on his store in Teacher Pay Teachers with different shapes that you can do, all learning isometric perspective. And I think it's really fun. When it prints out, it has the reference photo, it has some instructions, and it also has a grid that you can print out. And so the grid and this are the same size, and this is just all fantastic. So I gave them some time to like learn how to do it on here and everything. And then I ramped it up a little bit by printing out this page a little bit larger. This is 150% larger than this. They have to make larger letters on here. Then once I've taught them how to do that, I change the measurements of each letter. So like for example on here, these letters are 4 squares by 4 squares, and I start showing them how to do it 6 squares by 6 squares, and instead of 2 deep, they become 3 squares deep on here. This is one that one of my students did, and once they have done that, once they have achieved this part, then I give them a piece of paper like this, actually a little bit longer than this, but about the same width. And then at this point, if this is good, they can take it to the window and tape it on there and trace the letter onto here to make their name. And that's what the rest of this video is going to be about. So once you have the worksheets and you've taught them isometric perspective and they've actually come up with a rough draft of their name, as long as it has 5 or more characters, they can then take it and trace it. All right, kiddos, listen to this. Everything I have done so far on this picture, on this learning to do these letters, is the hardest part. It is difficult to figure out how to shape the letters so that they look like block letters that are 3-dimensional and sort of real in space. And so I took my time. I took probably more time doing that than I did anything else. And then we get to the fun part, the part where we start to shade it in. Once your picture is right, once all your letters are right and you figured them out, then you can take it to the window and you can trace it. Don't be in a hurry to get to this part and zoom past getting the letters absolutely correct. Once you get the letters correct, then you can tape it to the window or use the light table and you can trace your letters. And when I did this, I moved my letters around so that they would overlap. I wanted the C to be slightly in front of the H and the H to be slightly in front of the A, and so on, for a couple of reasons. One, overlapping just makes it look a little bit more mature. Most students can draw a letter, get to the point where they draw the letter, and then they can draw another letter and they don't overlap, and like that's easy. But overlapping it is a little bit more challenging, and so I think it just makes it look a little bit more mature. But you know, you might want to space it out. You might want that appearance. And so I overlapped mine just a little bit, and that also makes it so that the paper, the overall picture, is a little bit shorter. So I don't have to use the entire length of the paper. And so because of that, I'm going to measure between the C and the border, and then I'm going to add that amount of space. So right here between the C and the border, it's a little over 1/4 of an inch. And then I'm going to come over to the end of the star and I'm going to make a mark that's the same, a little bit more than 1/4 of an inch distance. And then after that, I'm going to add a little bit of a border right here. It's a 1/2 inch border. Come down here to the bottom and make that mark again. That way I can line them up just right. And I'm going to connect those dots. So this is the line right here that is next to the letters, and then that's the outside excess paper. I'm going to take my ruler, lay it there, and my X-Acto knife, and I'm just going to cut it off. Once I cut it all off, this is where the fun begins. I'm going to get a Sharpie pen, and I'm going to use it to hatch or crosshatch whatever it needs in order to make the values right. One secret to making it look three-dimensional and readable from a distance is to make every plane a different value. So if it is inside, like the inside of the sea right here, where the light is not likely to be able to hit it very well, then I'm going to shade it the darkest. If it is the top of the letter, I'm going to leave it white because usually light comes from above, and so the light is shining down onto the top of these letters. If it is underneath, I'm going to make it, or to the right or to the front, I'm going to make it a little bit darker than the top. So even the face of this, I'm shading in a little bit. I'm really just going by the reference photo that I have there on the right. I'm only making changes if I need a little bit more contrast in like the side of a letter versus the front. Another thing to keep in mind is that all of this video has been sped up a little bit, and so what really took me an hour and a half or 2 hours maybe to do looks like it took me 5 minutes. So be patient. We live in a world where we kind of get mad at McDonald's if we don't have our food in 5 minutes, but that's not how artwork works. To do anything meaningful, it usually takes time and effort. So take your time, make your lines nice. Mine are a little bit sloppy, but they're not as sloppy as they really could be. I've seen people just scribble and then be mad because it didn't turn out the way mine turned out. So take your time and draw your lines straight to the best of your ability, and then you'll have good artwork when you're done. Once I got all of my letters filled in, I then used a larger chisel tip Sharpie to go around all of the letters because I wanted to make my background dark. However, I did not want to just color it in totally black because that's boring. I wanted to have some fade, some value, some interest, some texture. And so as I filled this in, I just, first of all, just went around the letters because I did want right around the letters to be really dark. But I also didn't want it to look like a very static outline. So in a few minutes, you're going to see me, in a few seconds, you're going to see me start to fill it in with Sharpie pen. As I was filling it in with the Sharpie pen, I also used it to clean up the corners. When I was going around it with the Sharpie chisel tip marker, I didn't get too close to the letters because I didn't want to mess them up. I wanted nice, sharp points. So I came back in and cleaned it up with Sharpie pen in all the corners, and then I started filling it in just like I did the letters, using hatching and cross hatching. And if you are paying attention here, you'll see that I went all the way around one time with just lines next to one another, just to see how uh, it would look. And then if I needed more, I added more. As I'm doing right here, I'm adding another layer going diagonally. And then after I added this layer diagonally, I decided it needed to be darker than that. So I'm touching up some of my letters here. Just made the right sides of all the letters a little bit darker. And then now I'm going in again against the again diagonally, but against the previous diagonal marks to make it darker yet again. And then at some point, I still wanted it to be darker, but I wanted it to not be quite as dark in the middle of each of these empty sections, but blend in more with the chisel tip layer. So I'm adding even more. This time I don't go all the way across. Just kind of coming off of that chisel tip a little bit. And this is going to create just a little bit of fade, and it's going to minimize the harsh outline of the black chisel tip marker. I want this to be so dark that it looks like I'm almost might as well have filled it in with the chisel tip. So I keep going back and I keep adding more and more right around the edges. Once I'm satisfied with how dark the background is compared to the letters, I'm done. And I can erase all the pencil lines that are sticking out, and I can turn it into Mr. Brown and get a grade for it. And they're hanging on my wall, hanging on the door to my bedroom, whatever I want to do with it. Now, guys, it is your turn to go and make your